Hi everyone, here we are. We're up top now in the castle. This is the Castle Hohenstein Salzburg in Austria. It's one of the largest castles in Europe. It's in incredibly great condition. And they have events in here. There's a restaurant here. And you see below us here the old city of Salzburg, which, next to Vienna is certainly probably the second most impressive city in Austria, and maybe some would even say even more impressive. But this is the birthplace, of course, of Mozart, the home of many great composers. You can visit his birth home just in the city below, and you can also see below us St. Peter's, which is a Catholic church, of course, that goes back to the 9th century, so over 1,000 years ago. Now, this castle here is located over 500 meters up. It's located on a stone precipice, if you will, and it's built in part out of stone, but it's also built kind of out of the cliff and out of the rocks. This castle was built in the 11th century, so we're talking actually really at the dawn of the High Middle Ages is when this castle was built, so in the 1000s. And the castle was built by von Helfenstein, who was the archbishop here. And he built it in the context of a crisis with the Catholic Church that's sometimes referred to as the crisis of lay investiture. This was the time when the Pope was Pope Gregory VII. And Pope Gregory VII is famous for the slogan that the Catholic Church is the vicar of heaven on earth. Pope Gregory VII is associated with really the real ascendancy of the Catholic Church towards full dominance in terms of political power in Europe, which of course lasted for half a millennia after this. So the lay investiture crisis was a crisis in which leaders not directly associated with the Catholic Church, like von Helfenstein, who began the building of this castle, this fortress, they would appoint local figures to the local church. And the Catholic Church, from the Vatican, didn't like this because the Catholic Church wanted to be able to directly influence the religious administering of Catholic ceremony, Catholic ritual, and also, of course, they wanted to have a direct connection in terms of political power. So a lay leader, a leader not associated with the church, appointing people into positions of political power in the church could be a potential threat to the strength and stability of the church itself. And so this fortress was really built and expanded on as the Catholic Church under Pope Gregory VII and leaders in Austria like von Helfenstein, the one who began constructing this cathedral in the 11th, or this fortress in the 11th century, sort of battled over power over politics, and politics associated with religion. Now, this is a very historic place, obviously, and this castle was expanded on during the period of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire, of course, was the sort of broad, loose realm ruled by European kings that very much identified and associates its power with Rome. But it wasn't ruled by the Pope, it was ruled by kings, and of course some of the most important kings of the Holy Roman Empire were Austrian kings, like the Habsburgs, for example. Now, in the period of the Protestant Reformation, this also was at the center of the Peasants' War, which followed less than a decade after Martin Luther really began the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, the beginning of the 1500s. And it became a site of the so-called Peasants' War, which was an uprising seeking to overthrow the monarchs, the leaders that lived in and controlled this area, that lived here and controlled this area. In fact, inside here, you can during the festival season, which we are in right now, which is in the summer, if you ever come here, they have opera, they have symphony, they have violin music, piano concertos, and so forth. It is this place is a real kind of, it's the heartbeat of culture and music in the old world and still today. But if you come here and you listen to, for example, some of the performances of Mozart, you'll probably be in one of the top ballrooms, for lack of a better word, and they have these red marble columns. It's Salzburg marble. It's from the area. It's very identifiable. And you'll notice that one of them, if you're ever here, has been damaged. And it was damaged in the Peasants' War, as peasants from below were sieging this castle fortress, and one of the cannonballs went through the window and actually struck one of these marble pillars, and still to this day you can see the broken scar. Now, as we look up around here and you can kind of get a feel for this area around us, this is just a piece of this fortress. It's really impossible to kind of do a video that would show you the entire fortress. It's really quite huge, and this is why I did the one video down below, because I wanted you to get a feeling for the imposing nature of this fortress up above the city of Salzburg. It is quite imposing, and a place like this would be almost impossible really to siege. Now, much of the bastions, the kind of walls, if you will, that protect this castle, were actually built in the 16th century, and some in the 17th century as well, as Western Europe and Central Europe became increasingly concerned over the rise of the Islamic Turkish Empire, which of course in 1453 had conquered the great city of Constantinople, which is today the Byzantine Empire, or which is today Istanbul. Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and today it's Istanbul, Turkey. The conquest of Constantinople, which had sort of served as a buffer for Europe from the Islamic Turkish forces for hundreds of years, opened up sort of the floodgates of Islamic influence in southeastern Europe. And of course there were battles fought on the frontiers of Austria between the Habsburgs, the Holy Roman Empire, and the monarchs of Europe, the Christian monarchs of Europe, and the forces of the Islamic Turks. And so much of these bastions out here, these walls that are designed to provide greater defense for a cathedral or a fortress like this, a castle. It's not really a cathedral. The cathedral's down there, actually. But these were built in the 16th and 17th century largely out of a fear that an invasion from the Islamic Turks was inevitable. Of course, ultimately, in some critical battles, the forces of the Holy Roman Empire would halt the expansion of the Islamic Turks under the leadership of kings like Philip II. Now, one thing I also want to note, and then I know it's running a little bit long, so I'll make a note real quick. In the medieval period, of course, gunpowder weapons very much were the death knell ultimately to fortifications like this, because of course, as cannon technology became more and more advanced, the idea that you could build large walls and some fortifications as a method of preventing attack became increasingly negated by more and more powerful gunpowder weapons and gunpowder technology, which of course began to emerge before the 16th century, but increasingly this type of fortification became less and less common. But I should say that in the medieval period, and this of course goes back to the ancient period before gunpowder technology had really negated the value of traditional castle fortifications, the way that you often might assault a place like this would be not necessarily to try to attack it and take it necessarily, but to siege it. And of course, sieges were a common way to defeat a highly fortified position. You would surround it, and you would remain on the outside, preventing any goods from entering. And eventually, they're going to run out of food. Famine could occur, and they also could fall. They could fall sick with disease. Not to say that this ever happened here, but in some cases, groups like the Mongols sieged cities that they used sort of early biological warfare in their sieges, where they would throw catapult rotting corpses over the walls of fortresses that would then infect the people on the inside of the castle, and thereby enhance the siege and help to bring down the opposing force that was holed up inside the castle. Again, not to say that happened here, but nonetheless, it's a good example because this is a highly fortified position, and it's just a good example of how we can kind of talk about how war kind of happened in many cases in the medieval period. So Hohenstein Castle, located 500 meters above the great ancient artistic city of Salzburg, begun construction in the 11th century AD or CE, about 1,000 years ago, around about the time, roughly, of, for example, the Battle of Hastings in England, in which William the Conqueror came from Normandy to England, and in the process became not only the king, the Norman king of England, but began the process really of the creation of modern England, for those of us who are sort of familiar with the historical development of modern England. Now we're in Austria here, beautiful Austria. You can see the tremendous mountains here, and so we're not in England, but I want to give you a historical context of how long ago we're talking when it comes to the construction of this place. And so if you ever come here, make sure you come to Salzburg, go see Mozart's birthplace, come up and see the castle, listen to some of the classical music that you have here, and experience the sort of feeling of classical Austria.